We've seen the growth of mobiles quite significantly at Xero. We talk about that the future of our product will probably be on a mobile device. In fact, we look at the logs and why people use mobiles, for example, with Xero is business owners are running a bank reconciliation or a cash reconciliation on their mobile. The average time is 7:15 a.m. versus doing, say, 9 a.m. if you're going through desktop. And that gives you great insight into the way we've become accustomed to really blending work and home life. That's both good and bad. But if you think about people using more mobiles, we're not the only industry affected by that. There's a lot of customers who are changing the way they consume information and do business. If you look at industries like banking, who now a lot of the internet banking is done through mobile, same for travel, real estate, automotive and online marketplaces. From a development perspective, in terms of the tech companies, they're focusing their attention where their customers are, which is where people are now using more mobiles. So we're seeing actually in some of those businesses, the mobile experience or the mobile interaction is actually better than what's available through your laptop, because that's where they're spending their time and energy. Interestingly, around the world, some areas like India and Africa, they've skipped the laptop component altogether, or the computer phase, and gone straight to mobile. That's because the hardware, or the device, if you like, the mobile phone, is much cheaper than the traditional computer. And as we move to the next generation of business owners in the future, we'll see the digital natives who've never known a time before smartphones. And we will be more likely to see mobile devices grow and the use of mobile devices going forward. Something else probably more recently is seeing remote working taking place, and that's become a necessity for a big portion of the population. We're seeing a much faster shift to online as a result of that. If we focus just in the last 6 months, and don't talk about this too much, but the impact of COVID-19 has been really interesting. On one level, it's been a recession-inducing event, and it's something that effectively must be weathered until things go back to normal, whatever normal looks like in the long term. But on the flip side, we've seen some green shoots where this crisis, if you like, has been a circuit breaker. It's forces businesses to adapt. In some ways, jolted existing businesses into acting with more urgency. And by no means am I suggesting that COVID-19 has been a pleasant transition. However, businesses of the future are always going to embrace change, move online, enable remote work, digitize payments, and market their businesses online. COVID-19 has accelerated that transformational process. And probably the best documented, or the most common trend that you've seen is the growth of online retail. So to give you a history of that, it took 10 years for online retail to get a 15% penetration. And in 3 months this year, that penetration doubled to 30%. So they effectively did 10 years growth in 3 months. Now that growth, in terms of moving to online, has come at the expense of a number of existing brick and mortar style retailers who hadn't focused on an online business model at that point. But again, that's where COVID's forced many businesses who've sort of pushed it to the back or hadn't properly invested in online platforms to really rethink how they operate. In terms of where we see the future, for example, of financial management of small businesses, it's very likely we'll see more integration with the government and regulatory bodies. I wouldn't say we have more regulation, but it'll be like we'll have more integration. Let's think of an example there would be if you've got a new staff member, rather than asking the staff member for a tax file number, very likely in the future you'll be able to ask for a mobile phone number or an email address to authenticate the ID of that person rather than using a traditional tax file number. That's sort of the path we're going from a government regulation perspective. We'll also see, almost guaranteed, we'll see the extension of the MyGov platform, the way you can get PAYG payment summaries at year end. And that's going to be the way the government's going to continue to interact with taxpayers. Finally, we're going to see a bigger integration of the banking system. So the banking system from 1 July this year, banks have had they're now subject to a set of regulations called open banking. And what this means is the consumers or the customers of the banks have rights to their own information that's held by the bank. That's stuff like fees, rates, transactions, credit history. And they'll be able to direct the bank to say, can you please give this to such and such a business in order to give greater credit checks? And the banks under this legislation can't refuse that. These laws have been in place for the UK for the last 2.5 years, and the ultimate result is you get much more flexibility in terms of switching between services like utilities, banks or otherwise. So we see a lot more flexibility from the banking system. However, in the near term, there's still plenty of uncertainty, with pockets of small business economy performing much better than anticipated, which is mainly due to the government stimulus packages that are in place. And when the government support is wound back, which is due in March next year, we'll have much clearer view of the true state of the economy and employment at that time. But that's what we see at the moment.
Fantastic, Andrew. Thank you so much. As I said, a few people have been joining as Andrew's been speaking. everything will be made available as a recording afterwards. So those people that missed the beginning of the event, no problem. Our next question is really around this new working environment that we find ourselves in, and a lot of workplaces moving to a more remote, almost fully online, like we are today. And what are some of the ways that this can be done effectively? How have you, as partners in the business, seen clients doing this? And I think Dale's going to lead off with this question with Leon, hopefully, now that he's online, with some things to mention. So Dale, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. At Advivo, I guess we were probably 6 months ahead of the curve on this one compared to a lot of businesses. We actually were working towards this going back probably 12 months ago now. We started to work towards having our team with the ability to work from home and what that would mean and how it would impact the rest of the team and the way we do things. So unlike most other businesses out there that had to scramble in March to make it happen, we had time to do it the slow way and think it through and do it right. So there's a few steps to the process. So the biggest challenge to it all is actually around managing the people, and making sure that everybody was comfortable with the idea and understood what it meant and what they could do, what they couldn't do, how it was going to work. So what we did to make that happen was, firstly, we actually put together a question and answer sheet for the team that we basically had a whole list of questions that we could think of that they might have as concerns, and we answered them on that sheet. So we handed that to all of our staff members when we told them this was something that was going to happen. We then actually set up one-on-one meetings with all of our staff members a couple of days after we announced what we were doing, so that we could go through all of their concerns. And then we scheduled another session a week or two after that, so that people had another chance after they'd had a bit more time to think things through, how that was going to work for them and how to manage that. So I think that the people element was probably the most challenging of the elements. We also had the technology side of things, obviously, how we were going to work with people at home. What gear were they going to use? Did they have cameras, headsets? What device were they going to use? So we had the logistics around getting that all set up, and we were fortunate we were able to buy a big bunch of good high quality webcams at a reasonable price before they all disappeared off the shelves. So that was fun. We also have that, obviously there's the internet issue at home, what connections people have and how that works. That was something we had to try and see what worked for people. We actually put in place a work from home allowance for all of our team. It's just a fixed monthly fee that we paid to all the team to help offset some of the costs they have for their internet connection and things like that, so that they could have a reasonable connection at home and weren't financially disadvantaged from having to do that. And we found that helped a bit. Definitely the internet connection's always an issue, as we've found with Leon's found today with Wi-Fi, and Andrew's sitting at home tethered on his phone and working fine. So it just goes to show the most modern high-tech technology doesn't necessarily always work. So the other things around that is it's not always going to work for every business. I know the way things rolled out with the pandemic, some industries and businesses can't work from home, and there's others where there's different challenges. I spoke with a legal colleague of mine a month or so into things, and he was saying he still had to go into the office most days because he had to sign trust account checks. And I just went, wow, that's still a thing. But it just goes to show, I think a lot of the things that have been holding businesses back, they're now being forced to challenge them in the current scenario and move their technology and processes forward to modernize them more to keep up with the times, which is really interesting. I think it's a process that was happening with businesses anyway, and it was going to happen more, but this has forced a lot of people to do that a lot more. I think a lot of people would have said 12 months ago that how would you feel about doing a video chat meeting with someone? A lot of people would have said, are you kidding me? No, I'll meet in person. But I think a lot of perspectives have changed a lot over the last 6 months. So I think that's great.
Can I just add to that video thing very quickly? One of the key things for us, and you know, as you said, every business's journey is different, but one of the key things for us was the video side of things, because there's so much communication in the face, and being able to actually receive the messages that other people are sending. We made video almost mandatory very early in the piece, because it's so important, and it's so easy to miscommunicate something via email or text or something like that. How many people have misinterpreted a text message? Anyway, yeah, so just a point on that. I realize everyone's journey is different, but for us, video was a really big one for us that we were keen to get right.
Yeah, and just to finish that question off, was there anything, Leon, that you had to add around how you've seen clients effectively working remotely and the benefits of sort of sharing information across the cloud?
Yeah, well, number one, don't let me touch the technology side of it to start with. So sorry about that, everyone, I was late. The one thing that a lot of people I've spoken to, first off, they just got in and tried it first and did things and realised it wouldn't be perfect, that they had to run with it and get going and then work on continuously improving it. Like a lot of things in business, keep improving it. And Chris just came in with the other thing that was really important, and it's just keep communicating with people, keep those lines of communication open. And we've done other things like bring in more social interaction and other things like that to bring the team together, because people do get a bit distant out there. Thank you, Jane.
Right, unmute myself. Thank you, Leon. So I'm going to send the first poll out, which is just a very quick yes or no answer, if you wouldn't mind just everybody answering that question. So back to you, Andrew, in terms of what's next. You know, some people have been using Xero products for a couple of years now, and some of the people who were attending today said exactly that to me. And they're starting to reap the benefits of seeing that dashboard, getting a sense of their business overall. But they're looking to grow their business now, and they're looking to make the most of technology. So what else is possible with Xero?
It's quite a regular question we get. As you mentioned, someone has been using Xero for a little while, or not Xero, just any sort of online platform. And typically we find it's usually the business owners are far more invested in the process than the staff are. And automation and working on processes are somewhat of a one-way street. Once you've automated a part of the business, you generally can't go back to the way it was, even if you've done it for 20 years beforehand. It's a very, very short period of time before we become adjusted to that. And by the same token, once you've worked on some part of the business, you're keen to find other parts, and that's the way to work through change. Rather than doing everything at once, is to sort of bite off small chunks of the workflow. So given it's a fairly broad audience today, what I thought I'd talk about is there's three real easier areas that are plug and play very quickly in terms of getting a great efficiency or getting a great return in a short period. So the three things I was going to touch on would be payment gateways, or finding ways to get paid faster, automating data entry, because no one likes data entry. And the third one is more focused for those who've got casual employees or sophisticated employee arrangements. There's some amazing, really, really strong benefits in terms of apps that are available. Good to know. Okay, so we've got a bit over half the audience who's using Xero. Good to see. So in terms of the first one, payment gateways is a really interesting area. It's not particularly new technology, but what it means is when you send an invoice to a customer, they have embedded in the invoice. So they open the invoice and they'll see a Pay Now button. So what it means is they can push a button and enter in their credit card details to allow them to pay you as quickly as possible. The alternative is they go and enter your bank account details, and you go via internet banking, or you send you a check. And those second or third steps, it just provides, a little bit more friction. There's extra effort required. If people can solve it straight away right now, you get a much better return in terms of people actually paying your invoices up front. It's also great if you hate chasing up late accounts. Just to give you an idea of how that works, there's a group in the world called Stripe. And if you've ever bought anything online, there's a very strong chance you've probably been a customer for Stripe but not known about it. Inside Xero, as an example, you can set up a Stripe account inside Xero, so it takes about 2 minutes to set up. The merchant fees are about 1.75%, or they are 1.75%. It's about 30 cents a transaction. There's no contracts. It's super easy to set up. So the next invoice you send out has a pay now button, and your clients can pay you via credit card immediately. So it's effectively an immediate plug and play for a fairly low cost. Again, depending on the needs. If this is a big frustration for you, it's a great way to get past that. Another option is there's a great program called Go Cardless. Again, it integrates with Xero. And what Go Cardless does is it's a direct debit function. It takes, there's no setup fee, it's a 1% merchant fee, and the total merchant fee goes up to $4. That's not a hugely expensive component. So you can set up a direct debit if you've got a regular amount coming out each month, if you're a subscription type business. But it's got a great feature where if you send you can have a direct debit depending on whatever's inside the invoice that you send your client. So say you've got a client who you send something every month or every quarter, but the invoice changes each month. The client will need to agree to terms and conditions, like with any direct debit. But if what you can do is send out the invoice and say the first of the month, and if that invoice is due for payment at the end of the month, it will direct debit from your client's account whatever's inside that invoice. Now, when I first heard that, I thought, hang on, I'm just helping myself to clients' wallets here. But I actually do that already. I do that with AGL. AGL sends me an invoice for gas and electricity at the beginning of the month. I get a month to review it. And then if I don't have anything wrong with it, I just let AGL take the money out of my account. I don't ever have to remember to pay it. I personally love that. I find it super convenient. And that's very easy to set up. It's straightforward. Again, great program depending if they'd be right for your customers. So payment gateways is a really simple and easy way to improve the efficiency of the cash, to reduce the friction, so it's not hard for people to pay you. It's a really specific area where in certain trades of construction, it seems to be very popular there. The next thing to talk about would be something like data entry. We can streamline a lot of the information you put in. For example, if you've got a series of receipts, let's go for a Telstra bill, you'd enter in the Telstra bill, the date, the amount, the GST component, and so on. You actually have to enter that all in manually. If you hate that job, there's some great tools that can do that automatically. I'll give you the same scenario. So if you're a Xero subscriber, there is a program that's complementary with your Xero subscription called HubDoc. That's HUBDOC, HubDoc. And HubDoc is a program that Xero purchased about 18 months ago for $70 million. It's an expensive program, which we give complimentary with Xero. And what it is, it's an artificial intelligence engine. So I'll explain how it works. If I have a Telstra bill, I take a photo, say with my phone, of that Telstra bill with the HubDoc application. It reads the bill, it reads Telstra, the GST, non-GST amounts. It'll read the date, the due date, and it also takes a photo of the image of the receipt itself. So it reads the receipt. It then can go through expenses. It finds that have coded Telstra in the past, and it'll code it to telephone expenses for you. If you choose to with the settings, you can push it through to Xero automatically as a draft payable amount. So it's ready and it sits inside your Xero file with a photo of the invoice attached. Now, in years past, that took about somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes for the processing to take place. But today it takes somewhere about 2 to 5 seconds. It's incredibly quick. So if you hate putting in that information, or if you've got a range of people in the field who are incurring expenses on behalf of the business or other people who do the work for you, HubDoc can replace that function, and it's very efficient. If you'd like to set it up, just Google the words Xero HubDoc setup. It takes about 2 minutes to set up, and again, it's ready to go straight away. HubDoc's kind of like an employee. It's not perfect immediately. Usually it takes somewhere between 1 to 3 months to start to learn a lot of your behaviors and start working correctly. So that's another thing I'd say in terms of getting just like that next generation of efficiency. Have a look at something like HubDoc if you're using Xero. And there's stacks of these. There's just a few that are very much the upper end in terms of sophistication. They're called optical character recognition. The next thing I'd look at, if you've got, would be casual staff. If you've got casual staff or a complex payroll. So I'll give you an example here. Say a pub is a great example. A pub, you can have staff who have, in the one shift, can be paid 2 or 3 different rates. You can have an award rate, that award rate changes after a certain time, say 10 p.m. And you could click over to another day, say at midnight, that moves into Sunday. And Sunday could be a public holiday or a Sunday day rate. If you're running 3 different rates of payroll for one employee, that's quite difficult to process, especially if you times that by 20 employees per shift. There's some amazing programs in the market. One's called Deputy, D-E-P-U-T-Y, as in deputy like a sheriff. And another one is called Tanda, T-A-N-D-A. And both of these have award wage interpretations. They take a lot longer to set up to get all the awards correctly in place. But once they're in, it shouldn't take you any longer than about 30 minutes, possibly an hour, to do your wages each week. It's very, very fast. In addition to that, they've got rostering apps. As a kid, I grew up, my mum and dad had retail stores and we were always rostering staff on and off. Or, let's say they were, because I was just a kid. And if someone, say, called in sick on a Saturday, mum and dad would have to go to work until we found someone to fill that shift. If you look at something like a deputy or a tander, if someone calls in sick, as the administrator, I can say that person can't work the shift, and they go, these programs go through historical employment records and find 3 or 4 or 5 people who are most likely to fill that shift based on previous shifts, who previously worked on a Saturday. It then sends out a push notification or a text to those 5 staff. The first staff who answers is put into the shift. The timesheet's updated. Again, if there's multiple award wages, they're paid differently from other people due to their age. Then it automates that calculation for you and the payroll's updated automatically. Anyone who has to manage staff knows what a pain that is, and it's just a great application, or a couple of applications to automate that process.
Andrew?
There's sort of 3 areas. Yes.
We do actually have a question, if you can see it in the chat. Is Go Cardless okay for credit card as well as transactional accounts?
Yes, it is. It can do credit cards as well as direct debits. So it can act as just a credit card payment gateway as well.
Yeah, great. Okay, fantastic.
If I could just jump in for a sec, Jane, too, one other thing, there is sometimes some reluctance from some people to give people access to debit their account. One other thing that Xero can do is send out automatic reminders of statements and everything. You can pre-program that so it's not a manual task, and it's a good in-between if you can't get people to go to full payment authorization. That's another interim step, but it's an automation, saves a hell of a lot of time and no manual requirements involved.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, that's great. I think we'll move on to the next question because it leads nicely on from what Andrew was saying. And again, anybody that's got any questions relevant to this, what apps to use, please put it in the chat. But with so many applications on the market for businesses, how do business owners actually decide which ones are right for them? And how do they integrate them into their accounting package, whether it's Xero or any other accounting package? I think Chris is going to lead off with the answer to that one.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Look, it's a good question, and there's 2 parts to it. So let's deal with the first one first, which is, how do business owners decide what's right for them? For me, it comes down to what question are we trying to solve? What problem are we trying to solve? Because there's so many different apps for so many different things. I actually read a report just the other day that said his opinion was that we're trending towards a situation where almost every line item on your P&L will have its own sub app that's controlling it, so to speak, and then Xero will just be the gatekeeper which catches everything in the back end. So basically what I would suggest is ask yourself that question: what are we trying to solve? Understand that there are lots of different apps out there to solve lots of different problems. Once you understand what problem you're trying to solve, do a little bit of research yourself, but not a lot. And I mean this sincerely. The reason is information overload will just get up and kick you in the butt every time. Unless you're in the industry, as soon as you start looking into something, what you'll find is there'll be 50 different apps all claiming to do it better than the others. And then you just go down a bit of a rabbit hole and trying to find out which one best suits you. And this is where I strongly suggest don't get overwhelmed. Talk to an advisor, talk to an expert advisor. Reason being, if you go too far down that rabbit hole, the result of getting overwhelmed is inaction. And there's a reason why you're looking at it in the first place. And if you get stuck in that little inaction bubble, you're just going to prolong what you've currently got. And that's no good for anybody. So talk to the experts. The next question is, who's the experts? There are, in my opinion, this is just my thoughts. There are people, vendors, like when you do your research, you'll find different programs that you think will suit. If you contact them directly, they're their application may well be perfect for you, but just be aware that they will be, you know, they'll be representing their product and suggesting that their product can fix all your problems. And in my experience, and they're not all like this, don't get me wrong, but in my experience, often people will try to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it may not necessarily be right for the business owner. We actually do a lot of work with, well, yeah, accountants is the next one. Actually, before I go on to accountants, let me just talk briefly about cloud integrators. As an accountant, we work with a few different cloud integrators ourselves. And I would actually suggest, in the right circumstance, for people to talk to cloud integrators. What I would do first, though, is talk to your accountant. Obviously, we'll put up our hands, happy to talk to anybody, but talk to your accountant first, because they should understand your business a little bit better. They should also understand what problems you're looking to solve. But what's more, some cloud integrators, and a lot of cloud integrators, and there's nothing wrong with this, will have affiliations with certain vendors as well. So your accountant should know who to put you in touch with to find something that suits your business best. So if we take us for example, we'll do so much. Well, for me personally, I'll do so much with a client, take them up to a certain level, depending on how little or how much we're looking to digitalize or integrate. When we get into some of the complex inventory systems or things like that, purely because there is so much out there, I know where my limit is to for my clients. And so I know when the point is where I go, okay, let's talk to a cloud integrator who has dealt with all these different applications, and they'll be able to better advise which ones specifically will suit my client better. And that's ultimately the answers that you need to get to. You need to find out which one will best suit you. And so that's essentially my 3 suggestions there. Do a bit of research yourself to start off with. Don't do too much. Talk to the experts, accountant, cloud integrators, and vendors. Be aware of the vendors, obviously. They're not all bad. Sorry, I'm not waging war on vendors. I'm really not. But it's just something to be mindful of when you're having those conversations. The next part of the question was.
Could I just ask a question,
yeah, please,
Chris, just around that, in terms of you know, that first question of trying to decide which is the right application for you. The thing that I did with a couple of those apps is that I sort of jumped in and tried like a time management app. I've got a marketing agency, everybody. And I tried a time management app, and I tried a couple of other apps. But the first thing I didn't do was check whether the integration was possible with Xero. I'd already committed my business to Xero. And then I jumped into a couple of apps without fully understanding how easy it was to integrate back into Xero. And I don't know if Andrew, you've got any sort of comments on that. You know, it isn't just, it's just that I happen to be connected to Xero. Other people might be already committed to MyOb. But do you think that's important to first decide whether the app that you're interested in does integrate well?
It definitely helps. Look, and as Chris was saying, at the moment there's 800 that officially integrate with Xero, but there's actually thousands and thousands of these applications, and it does get too big. I would just let our good friends at Google to help out. So if you just Google the word Xero integration and the app name, you generally find out pretty quickly whether it does or doesn't, or if it's MYOB or QuickBooks Online, any of those. You find out, and a lot of the time they don't just integrate with one accounting platform, they integrate with a few.
Yeah.
But that's what I do. I usually, to be honest, I get asked the question all the time and I Google it and it answers the question probably 99% of the time. So.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. Back to you, Chris.
Oh, I was just going to answer the second part of that question, which was how do business owners then integrate those apps into their accounting software? And it's kind of part of the process. Like when you're going through the process of a client to digitalize part of their business or all of their business, it's really about understanding from them what the pain points are, and as I said before, what those problems are that you're trying to solve. Ultimately, you'll come up with a bit of a plan as to which applications will be best suited to get the outcome that we're after. And then it's just about putting a timeline in place, setting those key milestones, and assigning responsibilities. There's certain things to do. There's certain things to do before other steps. For instance, you don't want to have to do things twice. And if you're using a certain application for one section of it, you don't want to duplicate that by setting up something else first. And not to mention the business owner who's trying to learn multiple pieces of software. You certainly don't want people having to learn different things twice. So it's about putting that timeline in place, what comes first, what comes next, and just having a clear roadmap basically as to how to roll things out, and just communicate that timeline, make sure everybody understands and everyone's on the same page, and things tend to go quite smoothly.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Could I jump in? Thanks, Jane, for a minute.
Are you going to mention the comment from Michael?
I haven't got, no. So I was going to say is also, it is very important. I see a few people on here that I know have been through some of this process, is involve your team and the key stakeholders as well. So you'll get to a certain point, involve the rest of your team that have responsibility and input. And quite often, as you saw from me before, business owners might not be the most technically minded people in the business. The people dealing with it every day are the ones that you need to get their input. So think of it a team thing. And I'd probably add to something that Chris was saying there, that some of the integrators, it's a bit like doctors and specialists. Some have their group of apps that they have their greater affinity with, that you'll go, and I've had help from Xero in directing me to the right ones in that way and other ways. So yeah, it's finding the right people with their level of expertise, a bit like specialists in the medical field.
Yeah, and a comment here, sorry, that Michael made in the chat box was that banks also have digitally focused specialists, and their job is to understand what digital banking problem needs to be addressed, and then look at potential providers in terms of integrating that in. So you can access digital specialists through your bank, which I think is a good point.
Yep.
I think also in terms of that integration and deciding which app is suitable to your business, doing a bit of business process mapping and understanding what the actual processes in your business are before you even start looking at what apps should address those business processes is really important. Yeah. Any other questions from anybody? Any of the attendees, please just put them in the chat box. We'll move on to the next question. So as business owners, how do we create certainty around costs? Certainly when doing system upgrades and taking on new applications, costs often seem to blow out. And then how do you keep a lid on those costs, especially when it comes down to multiple cloud-based subscriptions?
I'll take this one if I may. What I find when doing a system review or an integration project is different people have different models for their pricing as to how they price their services, and this is where we're talking about cloud integrators and whatnot as well. So just be aware, I know a lot of people do provide an upfront fixed fee. Obviously it's got to be scoped as well. My suggestion is to make sure that you've at least got some training in there. So as you understand what you're dealing with, it's one thing just to convert to a new system, but then just get lumped with it and have, if you, not saying people would, but I know that there's some online providers that do everything online and do it extremely on the cheap, so to speak. But basically once they're done, they walk away, they wash their hands, and then people are calling us saying, hang on, they've set this up, how do we do this? And so just be aware what you're getting, and just make sure there's a little bit of training in there, at least a level that you're happy with. The other thing I would say as well is just be, what I've found from experience, and it depends on everybody's situation, as you mentioned before, Jane, everybody's, people that are online today are in different stages of the journey. I'll just share a couple of quick stories, just two examples of ones that I've worked with recently. So one gentleman, we're actually in the process of doing this at the moment. He's on it's an ERP system which is an enterprise resource planner for the entire business. Now, this is it's a very well-known one, and it's quite expensive to run. This business isn't a huge business, but it's not a small business either. So it does need a robust system to keep it going. And once upon a time, this ERP that they're running was, and still is actually, one of the market leaders in its field. But the level, you almost need a degree to use the thing. And that's not a problem for people that are familiar with using it. So we can get the reports that we need, it's no dramas at all. But the client themselves, like when they have a certain level of staff turnover, they lose track of how to use this system. Not to mention the reporting. As soon as you want to pull some information that's a little bit left of center, again, you pretty much need a degree in IT to write a new report for it to be able to spit out what you want. And to their credit, they can give you almost anything that you want, but it's very costly and it's a very time-consuming process. And my experience, to be honest, is it's frustrating for clients. Unless they've got that continuity within their business of people that know how to use this software, they end up getting left behind, so to speak. So in that situation, this is a gentleman who, part of his solution is we're putting Xero in as the base, but we've also got an inventory add-on with it as well. And there's a couple of other add-ons, deputies are actually already being used as well. D is the inventory add-on that we're going with. And there's also a CRM which tags in and sort of ties into a particular industry piece of software that he's using as well. And they all link into the one. And it's actually the amount of information that he's going to be able to pull from it is all the stuff that they need to be able to pull, that they're currently struggling with their current system. And in their instance, it's actually a fraction of what they're currently paying for their subscription costs, because they're licensing this full ERP and they can't use it, so they can't get the information that they want, and it's costing them more than what the solution that's in the process of getting rolled out is going to be costing. And it actually provides the information that they need, and they can use it. So for that particular one, it's a bit of a no-brainer. And I'm mindful of time, sorry, so I'll keep moving. But the other one I wanted to touch on just quickly is a very similar situation. These guys are running inventory as well. It's another client. And we're rolling them over from it's actually from an old version of MyOb, which is no longer supported. It's an old Apple version. And in their instance, they've owned the software. So they've owned it outright. They weren't paying subscription fees on it. So for them, anything that they're going to spend now they see it as a cost. They see it as an increased cost. On the flip side of the coin, you look at the problems that this level of automation and the problems within their business that this level of automation is providing solutions for. And it's just horrendous. In their particular instance, they've been battling with landed costs, and I realize not everyone's an accountant on this chat, but the way to account for landed costs in a business, there's a few different ways you can do it, but for these guys, they amortize that cost. And in this instance, we're talking about freight of about 25 grand or something like that on one item that will come in. So it's quite a significant amount, but they'll amortize that cost across the price of these products. So finding a piece of software that will do that for them is actually quite easy, but they've been doing it on spreadsheets for years and years and years, been doing it on spreadsheets, putting it into their other system, which I won't say the name again, sorry. And what we've found as well, by just digging a little bit deeper into what these guys do and how they do it, the information that they need for their inventory side of things, the system that they were using before, just whilst they were able to pull reports and metrics that they needed in order to run their business and move their business along to take it to where they want to take it, was possible, but it was very cumbersome, very laborious. Look, we're talking, it would take the sales manager a couple of hours to pull the figures from the different locations, put them together in some kind of meaningful report, and then he's up to assessing it and talking to the owners about it. The solution that we're in the process of putting in place for them, they've actually just rolled out a reporting pack themselves where essentially you can automate the entire report so it turns up in your mailbox on a Monday morning. So this sales manager's just freed up 2 hours of his day once a week just by doing that. Not to mention he can now get the same reports more often if he wants it. It's amazing what the benefits that we're actually able to provide by automating some of these things that people, it just saves so much time. It really is incredible. Anyway, so in their instance, yes, there's a cost to it, but the time saving and the automation and the benefits that they're going to be receiving from it, for as soon as they actually understood those benefits, it's a no-brainer. The cost, it just makes sense. The benefits are far outweighing the cost. So anyway, sorry, over to you, Jane. I'll stop rambling.
Thanks, Chris. And again, anybody that's got any questions, don't forget to put them in the chat box. So one of the other questions that we had was around dashboards, really. And are there any good applications out there for accounting reporting and providing effective management dashboards so that people can, from a management perspective, get better information from their accounting? I think you got some comments around that, Leon?
Yes, thanks, Jane. And look, I sort of use this little bit of analogy. What we've been talking about so far is about a journey, and what we've been talking about, we're heading off on a journey. We've got the car, we've serviced it, we've tuned it up, we've pumped the tyres. So we're going to run smarter, we're going to be more efficient, we're going to get there quicker. Now we need to turn on the GPS and turn on the headlights and see where we're going and get some data that's coming out of all of these tools, all feeding into one place, and having a dashboard that's going to drive operational and strategic decision-making process going forward. We have our Business Pulse report that it comes out of some software called Spotlight, which integrates with Xero, and it just pulls the information straight out. There's some smarts go into it up front. You need to set up the benchmarks, the KPIs. And a lot of people, when we talk about benchmarking and integrating to Xero, they get this thought, well, hang on, this is only going to be looking through the rear vision mirror. It's looking at financial data, which is lagging data. You can bring all sorts of leading indicators in there, such as sales leads, conversion rates, all sorts of other things can be built into it. And it comes out in a nice graphical format where you can, generally a lot of these dashboards, as you know, have the traffic light colors, green, red, yellow, and it makes it so much easier to understand. You can delegate parts of it to various people from their division. It can, a number of other entities we get involved in venture capital, etc., or they'll have venture capitalists invest in their organisation. So you send these reports out to your investors or other stakeholders, and everyone's getting a nice, neat summary report that is meaningful, and it can drive decision-making process. So dashboards are so important, and you need to get all of the data from all of these apps feeding into one common dashboard. Can just make life so much easier. Otherwise, it's you're driving in the dark, you've got no GPS, you don't know where you're going, and you're probably going to run off the road, and that's not a good thing. That's probably it from me.
That's great, Leon. And Julie's made a comment that thanks very much for using non-tech speak for those of us who don't understand technology, and I think that's really important for so many of us that own businesses. This whole concept of automation and integration, we know that it's complex and we know that it's a challenge, but we don't understand it. We don't understand which apps, where do we go? So it is nice to know from your accountant, your business advisor, that there is some knowledge there around that integration. And even if there's something that Advivo don't understand, they have the partners through Xero to go to and work with to help with that solution. I think that's really important. Andrew?
Jane, can I just jump back in there for a minute?
Sure.
Also, when you set up a lot of thought goes into setting up these dashboards, but one that I'm working through at the moment, it's going to drive the whole pricing strategy and the review. And if you set it up properly, it will make your pricing reviews in future years so much easier, and simply you can extract the data, you can see where everything's going. So putting thought in, and you mentioned before, Jane, about process mapping and some of the other things there. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's doing it right. We often use the saying here, start with the end in mind. And if you put the thought into that at the beginning, you'll get long-term benefits and cost savings and time savings in the future without the frustration. You'll be able to sleep at night.
Great, yes, and somebody's question earlier on about how do we keep the costs in check. I've actually seen some apps that help you set up overseas accounts. I've got an app called AirWallets, which was so easy to integrate into Xero, and it gives me the ability to pay for things in international currencies, as well as get money in from international currencies, and it saves a lot of money in conversion costs with your bank. So there's so many of those things out there that can help you save costs. There's a question here. I think there's a question there from Sharon. I don't quite understand the question, Sharon, but around exec summaries and a trusted source, that we can't wear every hat, that as a business owner, we can't wear multiple hats. So we need to be able to go to someone who's a trusted advisor who understands how all these things work together. Yeah.
If I can jump in on that one, I might say, like, one thing we say at Advivo, we don't know everything. We're not the oracle of all knowledge, but yeah, our partner relationships, and it's not with just Xero, there's lots of other people there, and I see some lawyers on the here. There's all sorts of people we deal with to harness the collective knowledge of a lot of people. And you know, when I was doing a scoping for an integration the other day, there's 8 people sitting in the boardroom there going through and working through the different parts, so the right input's there. So I think it is involving all of the people that are needed to do that. Probably we as accountants are a good part of the filter to bring everyone together, but we don't know everything, and we rely heavily on some other experts. And you know, Xero is one of those people that we tend to call and get directed when we're talking about apps, because they know the ones that are going to work best.
Can I just jump in very quickly as well? Recent example from me, the client had gone so far down a particular path, and for all intensive purposes, we thought that was the, at that point in time, we thought that was the best path. Excuse me. We thought that was the best path for them. Another little piece of information came to light, which actually meant big things for the recommendation. This particular client is very keen to get moving and very keen to get cracking on Xero. But in that instance, the best advice we could give them, and at the moment, this is where we're at, we've pulled the skids on the conversion for the simple reason that to go in the wrong direction just wouldn't have done them justice at all, and it wasn't going to achieve what they're after. We've since found a far better solution to their problems, and we're about to take those skids off again, but it's set them back an extra couple of weeks, which was absolutely the right thing to do. And at the time, I could sense a little bit of frustration, but at the end of the day, if that's the best thing, if that's what needs to happen to get the right outcome, it's absolutely best to do it. So yeah, you're spot on, Leon. It's not just, it's not just getting in and sorting it. There's a lot of people that need to get the right solution in place. Anyway, sorry, over to you, Jane.
Yeah, so just if there's any final questions, please put your hand up or put a note in the chat. I just thought I'd give Andrew the chance, just is there anything else from Xero in terms of any other comments across the board? We've got a few minutes left.
Look, no, I think the guys have really covered it well. The bit for me as well is, if you ever speak to a vendor like ourselves, we're always going to tell you we're the right option. So we always say that you have a chat to someone who's independent, and usually the accountant is a great source. But if you can't find that information from your accountant, try somewhere else. So like having known the guys at Advivo for a long time, to let you know, I work just with accountants who work with about 4,000 across Queensland, and it's not commonplace. It's not something that's taught at uni. It's not a technical skill. It's something that the more progressive firms have actually gone out and sought, and it's part of being an all-round advisor rather than just being someone who does financials and tax at year end. So this is sort of the modern way that businesses are going to be run. If you're being frustrated by any sort of lack of advice you can get, I'd suggest do the unthinkable and talk to someone who's not your accountant, because that very rarely happens. But having worked with Advivo, I can say the guys here know their work very well. In fact, I'm sure you know Xero much better than I do, because you use it day to day and actually beat your head against the wall when there's really unique client problems. Also, from getting an external advisor in, you're seeing it from more of a commercial viewpoint, exactly what Chris was talking about, having a cost and benefit analysis. And it might seem right initially, it might seem exactly the path you're going to go down. It might be plugging a gap that's not going to solve the problem in the long term. And that's having a great accountant who sees it from a commercial viewpoint can give you really good independent third-party advice on that.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. There's just one final question. I think I'll give it to Leon in terms of somebody asked, is there an email that people could submit future questions to, Leon? What's the best way when questions come up for them to submit?
Look, if you want to send it in to us, just send it to info@advivo. We'll, as I said before, not any one of us are the specialists there. So Chris will be better at some things, Dale will be better at some, and I'll be better. So we'll send it to info@advivo. We'll get the right person within our team to respond, and we will go out and find who else we need from Xero or wherever else to get you in touch with the right people that can help connect the dots. And that's what a lot of it is about. It's connecting the right dots to deliver the outcome and working through and understanding exactly what that outcome in the beginning is the starting point.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. And thanks to everybody for participating in the polls. We'll also be sending around a survey to get some feedback from everyone, what they thought of the format. And I think Leon's got a bit of...
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Thanks for facilitating. And Andrew, as we do at these things, it's customary to give the guest speaker a bottle of wine. So thank you very much.
It's been rehearsed beforehand. Thank you very much. Really much appreciated.
Well played, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. I hope...